Welcome to the Book Party Podcast.
Join us as we journey into the world of books with Michael T.
Prepare to be captivated by engaging interviews, insightful discussions, and fascinating stories. You'll discover new adventures and gain insight into the creative process of the authors themselves as they share their struggles and accomplishments. Now let's hear from Michael T.
This is Michael T. Welcome to the Book Party Podcast, the podcast that takes you on a journey through forgotten corners of history. In this episode, we're diving into the compelling story of a remarkable woman whose legacy has been obscured by time, but whose voice resounds through the ages. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Cynthia Neale and her groundbreaking book, Catharine, Queen of the Tumbling Waters. Through meticulous research and vivid storytelling, Cynthia Neale brings to life the extraordinary tale of Catharine Montour, a Metis woman born during Pennsylvania's Long Peace. In a world of shifting allegiances and tumultuous events, the Montour family emerges as an unconventional yet revered clan. Imagine their home a melting pot of fur traders, missionaries, indigenous peoples, and colonial leaders, all gathering under one roof. As the shadows of conflict loom over the land, Catharine's longing for a tranquil life by the waterfall takes an unexpected turn. The Long Peace gives way to the French and Indian War, and later the American Revolution. Amidst these storms, Catharine Montour transforms from a quiet dreamer to a fearless, determined leader who fights for peace in her village and beyond. But it's not just battles and warfare that define Catharine's story. Join us as we journey through time to uncover the hidden truths of the American history. As General John Sullivan's campaign threatens to erase Iroquois villages from the map, Queen Catharine stands tall, guiding her people with unwavering resolve. Today, as the echoes of indigenous voices struggle for recognition in a world that often forgets, Cynthia Neale's masterful work sheds light on an indomitable spirit of Catharine Montour. Her story isn't just a recounting of the past, it's a call to recognize the shades of history that often remain unexplored. So buckle up for an enlightening journey into the pages of Catharine, Queen of the Tumbling Waters, a story that transcends time and bridges the gaps of our understanding of the past. Now, Cynthia, why don't you take it from here, fill in the blanks a bit, and tell our listeners about yourself.
Thank you, Michael. That's quite an introduction. I feel honored to be on the program. I'm a native of Finger Lakes in New York State, and I grew up knowing about Queen Catharine Montour, that she led her people to safety to Fort Niagara in Canada, but little else. And I believe that her spirit was always with me. But I had left New York State and moved to New England 26 years ago, always returning. I'm a writer of historical fiction. As a young girl, a bookmobile came rolling into my town, and I read voraciously, and I dreamed of becoming a writer at age 11. And so from there, you have to make a living. And so I was an English major, and I worked as a paralegal, but I was always writing. And before Catharine, Queen of the Tumbling Waters, was released in April, I had four other novels under my belt in a series called the Irish Dresser series. And I also have a cookbook, a whimsical cookbook with watercolors, recipes, dessert recipes, and essays.
Wow, that's quite the repertoire of books. So on your publishing journey of all of your different books, Did you take the route of self-publishing or finding an agency with an agency route, or did you have a mixture of the two?
I have had independent publishers. I've had four throughout my career, and this now I have three. And the publisher for Catharine is a California publisher that really focus on female authors and women of history who have been forgotten. And they're wonderful. They're small, but very accessible, very supportive. And so we've worked together. They do a lot of work. It did a lot of work getting this book out.
That's fantastic then. So, did you do collaboration with them, or did you have to do a lot of the work yourself, as far as getting things like the formatting, editing, book cover, or did they take care of that sort of thing for you?
They really do everything, just as a traditional publisher would do. They, edit, we go back and forth, and they do the editing. They have copy editor. Cover design. What was unique with this book is that usually with most publishers, they will work with you, ask you what kind of cover, but in the end, they choose what it's going to be, and they usually have an in-house graphic designer. But I had wanted a friend of mine who is Vincent Crotty, who is a wonderful artist from Ireland who lives in Boston, and he's a fine artist. And it was, he took a cut and pay, but he was willing to do it because I worked with him. I do some oil painting myself, and he's been a mentor. So that was unique in that they allowed me to suggest Vincent, and then they worked with him in designing the cover. And I love the cover. It's a beautiful cover.
It is very beautiful. Take us to a point of what you would consider your worst author moment in writing this book.
Well, I think there's been quite a few because it's been, this particular book or just as an author?
Actually, in this particular book, what would be your worst author moment?
Well, it took many years to research because I was researching it while I was writing my other books. And I don't really know if I have a terrible author moment, embarrassing moment for this book. I have for my other books. I can say that the worst author moment was the research. And the worst author moment, actually, to be honest, was my mom was my family believes that we have Native American blood. And if you saw a picture of my great grandmother, you certainly would think so. So the story is that we do. My great grandmother was from Pennsylvania and was indigenous. And anyway, she loves all my books. My mother was my first reader, my great supporter. My husband and my mother were they're the ones that read my books initially. And my mother just couldn't wait for this book to come out. I knew it was going to be her favorite. But she was in hospice and she was nearing death. And I had, the fourth edit of the book. And I had my previous publisher decided they weren't going to publish this book. So I didn't have a publisher. And she didn't want to die until she had this book in her hands. And I was able to read. So that was the worst. That was very difficult, but there was grace in it because I read her an edit. And in the middle of it, she was very alert and aware, and her eyes were big. And one day she just grabbed my hand and she said, "Oh God, I love Cindy," called me Cindy. "I love Cindy so much. And you love her even more. That's a whole lot of love. Please don't let the wind blow away her dreams and find her a publisher." Well, it was 2 months after her death that I had offers from 2 different publishers for this book. So that was my worst moment, is my mom dying in the midst of me finishing editing, preparing this book for publication, and her not being able to hold it in her hands. I think the other one the other moments with the other books is funny and a worse moment, but this was very poignant. And
Right.
so, yeah, both worse and good as well.
Let's talk about an epiphany moment where you could have been doing anything except writing. You could have been driving, cooking, going to bed, or even sleeping and wake up to it. But an epiphany moment being just this bright light bulb go off in your head, just aha moment, this wow moment, all of a sudden, and you got to find a pen and a piece of paper and write it down before it fades. Did you ever have a moment like that?
Well, I've had many, and it's just deciding what you would like me to talk about, because I've had all of that. I like to write in different, most, not all genres, but different genres. And historical fiction is really because I feel that these characters have chosen me. And I've had almost paranormal experiences with them. That would be the light bulb going off. And with Catharine, I would go back home to New York every year, a couple times a year, and stay about a month each time and do book events and visit with family. And I always walk a trail that's named after Catharine, and it's Catharine Valley Trail. And so I'd walk this beautiful trail, and on the trail, off the trail, is a memorial. And in the memorial it says, always remember this. And I'd always think, remember what? There's so little we know, and we weren't taught in our schools about the Iroquois and about Queen Catherine Montour. And there was a time when I stood there and I was working on my third novel in the Irish Dressers series, and I literally had this loud voice in my head, write my story. And I recall just stomping my foot. No one's around, and I said, no, I'm writing Nora's story. And it was that evening when I was staying at my mother's that I pulled a book off her shelf that was about the Iroquois, because this is Iroquois territory there. And I was reading about the corn, beans, and squash. And in the morning when I woke up, there was a dried kernel of corn in my bed. It was May, it wasn't autumn, when everyone hangs dried kernels of corn for decoration on their walls. It was May. I don't know where that dried kernel of corn came from. So that really was, I have to do this. I have to write this story. And so I sometimes felt plagued by her, like she was nipping at my heels, but I had some other experiences, even going into another time just singing, not singing, but humming on the trail that I was walking the following year. And suddenly I was singing in a different language, and my husband happened to call, and I jokingly said, I'm singing in the Iroquois language, because it was a beautiful day. And I don't know, I was odd, but I was joking and said this. And he, the engineer, said, oh, that's nice. And later that day, I went to a farm and craft market that's run by the Amish in Penn Yan, New York. And as I was walking, I thought I heard music like what I had been singing. And I followed that music. It was a Native American store, and the owner was from the Seneca tribe. And I told him my experience, and he said, you must write this book. So those are just two of my experiences of just knowing I could not get away from doing the research and writing this novel.
Well, let's switch up to today. What is the one thing that you are the most fired up about or excited about right now today?
Well, I would say seeing my work, first of all, I love to bring people together, and we hold Irish dances in our home for many years. We didn't, of course, during COVID, and then I had to have a hip replacement. So this year I'm looking forward to it again, bringing people together. We do storytelling and dancing and singing, and bringing other people who don't understand the culture that we have, the Irish culture, and they come in and they share it. We share it with them. And it's the same for this. I had a book launch a book launch in New York, and I had one here in New Hampshire. And the book launch I had in New Hampshire was at this very, very old inn. And this inn, a year ago, I was sitting in at a restaurant in the inn, and I knew there was something peculiar about the inn. And I researched and found out it was built by General John Sullivan, who led the campaign to destroy all the Iroquois villages at the end of the American Revolution, including my real life character, Catharine Montour's village. And I knew right then that when this book was published, I wanted to have my celebration of this Iroquois queen at the very inn that her oppressor had built, because in the beyond it's over. In the beyond, it's forgiven. It's here now. We need to forgive. We need to know. We need to understand. We need to heal from, and make sure we don't let history repeat itself. So the launch that I had there was just beautiful, and being able to share all of this in this very area, in the state where General John Sullivan is from, which I didn't know. I heard of the name in New York, but lived here all these years and didn't know that General John Sullivan was from here, a one-time governor and statesman. So I'm fired up about that, and also the fact that I have a screenplay for my other 4 books, and I've been pitching it to producers, and they've shown interest. It's a long shot, but they've shown interest. And I'm going to pursue this. Now that I have some time, I'm going to put more effort into this.
This is Michael T. We invite you to go to thebookpartypodcast.com, hit that subscribe tab on top, and scroll down to the icon of your choice, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or Odyssey, where you can download and follow us there. And please leave a review. Please don't forget to sign up for our video newsletter and get the latest information for our upcoming shows. Now, Cynthia, we are entering the lightning round. In the lightning round, there are 4 pointed questions for 4 pointed answers. So, before you were an author, before you ever started, actually being an author, what was holding you back from becoming an author in the first place?
Well, I think it was the fear of rejection, and I think most artists, and especially authors, do fear this. And was my voice important, unique enough to write? And also just growing up in a small town, coming from, a family where my mother was a single mom and raising us and not having a lot of advantages, not having confidence in myself. This is many years ago because I've been writing for many years, and I have a few books under my belt, and so I don't feel that way now. But that rejection is always there, no matter how many books that you have come out. But that, I would say, rejection and just a lack of confidence when I was so young.
That's probably the biggest answer we get. When you were writing, what was the best advice you had ever received?
Well, there's been quite a few. I've had some great mentors, and mostly is not giving up. I mean, doing your research, at it, because I do say I've learned, and I learned from these mentors long ago, because when you're young, you write something and you, well, first of all, you first begin, you don't have the confidence, and you write a sentence, you say, I have to perfect the sentence before I can go on, or you do a paragraph, whatever. And then you realize time goes on, you just have to let it flow. And a lot of it has to flow from your heart. But you really have to do your homework. You have to write and edit and write and edit. And I say, write, rewrite, and rewrite until you can barely stand it any longer. Then go and do something else that provides immediate gratification, like baking or dancing. And this was given to me by a good friend who was a journalist many years ago, who just said, practice every day. And there is so much rejection, and I could plaster probably my home with rejection letters from many years. And there was one day I just wanted to give up and I didn't want to write anymore. I just wanted to do something else, painting, whatever, dancing. A friend knocked on my door, and she didn't know the state I was in when she came. I was still in my writing clothes, which really means my bed clothes. And she dropped off a belated gift. And she did take one look at me and she said, "Okay, let's go for a ride and let's look at the sunset." So sitting in her car viewing the sunset, uh, I thought to myself, the sunset is so brilliant, golden, and it was so hopeful. I said, I want to believe that I can live and I can do what I love with passion right to the end of my life. And I want to believe I can write like a good book right to the end. Well, later I opened up her gift, a book, and right away I came to this quote. When you want something, go back and go back and go back, and don't take no for an answer. And when rejection comes, don't take it personally. It goes with the territory. Expose yourself to as much humiliation as you can bear, then go home and go do it all again tomorrow. Betty Furness, activist and writer. So that was powerful because the rejection letters were pouring in um, during this time period. I think my first adult book.
Okay, well, share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success.
Well, I think I shared that in what I just said as far as rewriting. Oh, I know. Um, try to take your emotion out of it, which is hard for sensitive sensitive authors, artists. And I started looking at querying as far as getting published. As far as writing itself, it's a lot of research and a lot of writing and rewriting and really doing your homework and having other people critique it. But as far as querying, find who your audience is. And you can get Writers and Poets book, and you go through it and you find these publishers that accept queries. And do it. Send out a multitude of these query letters and do it unemotionally and do it as if you're playing the lottery. I don't play the lottery, but this is what I'd do if I did. This is how I'm looking at it unemotionally. And I think that has contributed to my success because I have found my publishers this way. I just send out a multitude of queries to the right publishers who publish my genre, and get a lot of rejections. But in the midst of the rejections, there were those 4 publishers who said yes to me.
Okay, well, Cynthia, we are now going to enter the grand finale. So why don't you take your time and just tell our listeners about your book?
So, Catharine, Queen of the Tumbling Waters. It is really weaves the true story. You said it so well, so I know you really looked into it. It weaves the true story of a remarkable unsung Iroquois and French woman who lived during the French and Indian War and the American Revolution. At the end of the American Revolution, she guides her people to safety to Canada when General John Sullivan leads a campaign that was initiated by General George Washington to destroy all Iroquois villages. And there was she as a young girl her family lived as Indians lived in Pennsylvania. And they lived, as you said, the long peace was early 1700s right up to 1750s, which was the French and Indian War period. And her grandmother had been originally from Quebec, from Three Rivers, and she was an interpreter. And she was French and Algonquin. And her grandmother moved to Pennsylvania and had Catharine's mother and her uncle Andrew. And both the grandmother and her uncle Andrew were cultural diplomats. They were translators. They knew many languages. And they were paid by the colonial governor of New York, of Pennsylvania. And so Catharine grows up in this home that is full of missionaries and fur traders and different tribes, and she learns a little. She learns to read a little. Um, Most of the novel is based on facts. Most historical novels, you don't need to have a bibliography. I have a bibliography. I have a character index. I have documented all my research. I found her peeking out here and there. She grows up in this home and has a very enriching life, but she begins to see later on when tensions rise because so many Europeans are coming in, and the colonists are going further into the land that is supposed to be saved by, the British government keeping it, preserving it for the Iroquois, for the Indian tribes, all the Indian tribes. And so she sees this suffering, things heat up, and for a while she does go against that relationship with her grandmother and her uncle, and she moves to a fascinating town, Canisteo, New York, where there's a rebel village that where there are defected British soldiers, French soldiers, runaway slaves, criminals who want to make right again, and she takes white captives to bargain with the governor to bring back some of this land for her people. And so but mostly she wants a simple life. She marries. Her husband is a Seneca chief, and he dies in a battle with the Catawbas, their eternal enemy. And in my novel, she has a relationship with a fur trader and a translator, and he is George Croghan, and he was a contemporary of George Washington, and he knew George Washington, and he was quite the guy. He loved all the tribes. He learned their languages, and he worked with her uncle. So he would have been in her life a lot. And so there's some romance there. And then she does marry again later. But during this time, she evolves a coming of age kind of experience, but she comes into her own. She on her way to meet her husband's family, her first husband, her Seneca chief, who is from New York, and she leaves Pennsylvania and she's traveling. She sees this waterfall. It's called Eagle Cliff Falls in Havana Glen in Montour Falls, New York. Of course, Montour Falls is named after Catharine. And excuse me, she falls in love with this waterfall. And she dreams always, this is where she wants to be. This is where she wants to end up. But she becomes somewhat of a peacemaker. It's recorded that she went to Philadelphia before the Revolution and after the American Revolution with Iroquois chiefs. And so she did become the peacemaker that her grandmother and her uncle had hoped she would be. But she had resisted it for a long time. And she also meets Benjamin Franklin. And so you would say, well, is this true? People have asked me, did you find resources? And I said, no, but he was where she was. She was where he was. And he was fascinated with the Iroquois Confederacy and their constitution. And he wanted the same for the 13 disparate colonies. And he went to the Albany Congress in 1754 and he suggested it. So he would go to a lot of the treaty meetings and he would record and he would print up the booklets. So in my novel, she does meet him. And I would like to read from this part. Well, I'll read after. So anyway, he forgets himself. He forgets himself when he first meets her because remember she's French as well, and she's very, knows different languages. He knows of her family, and he forgets himself, and he's all excited about the Iroquois Confederacy, and he says, if savage Indians could have unity for years, because they did, because this Constitution that's believed at least the 1400s, some sources say 1200s, been around right through the American Revolution. That's a long time that you'd have 6 tribes, 6 nations that are unified and have a constitution. And he said, if these savages could have, and these are his words, why not us? And forgetting she's sitting there and that she's this so-called savage. But this is at the end of the American Revolution. I don't want to give too much away, but they're meeting during the time of when the writing of the Constitution was happening and on a very hot July day in Philadelphia. So she meets him there. He asked if she would have coffee with him. So this is her perspective. We sit in the London coffee house on Front and Market Streets, in a building with a large window facing the street. Mr. Franklin tells me it is a very popular coffee house, but one he will not frequent on market days. Out this very window on market days, my dear, one not only sees barrels of rum being sold to the Indians, but enslaved Africans being auctioned and sold. It is something I detest, slavery. But one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, I say. He removes his spectacles and dabs at his eyes with his handkerchief. I don't know if he is crying or he has the eyes of the old ones that often run. I believe it is because the old ones have lived so long with grief that it overflows without consent. Our bodies know our stories and try to care for them for us. But has Benjamin Franklin known grief? I'm sorry, my dear, I am old and seem to have no control over these eyes, or the rest of my body for that matter. He laughs and then looks into my face with gravity. I see then he has known sorrow. Chief Canestratego said that many arrows cannot be broken as easily as one, and right now we're trying to bundle the many arrows of our 13 colonies together into our new country. Your new country. Our new country, Catharine. You and your people are also of this new country. I like the old country, Mr. Franklin, and have had no say in this new country. What Indian has, what woman has, what African has that you are in sympathy with. I'll stop there.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful statements that she's making. And they were all true.
Yes, it's a difficult history. I think that it is I think that what I see now that we didn't learn, the history of the Iroquois and the history of their contribution, how eloquent and how intelligent and their contribution, because this chief had even said in a treaty, you should do what we have done. And do you know, at the end of the American Revolution and the Iroquois tribe, I mean, they were just torn apart. That was it. And they called George Washington the town destroyer, rightly so. And I think it's interesting that we're raised thinking of George Washington as the father of our country. It's such a gulf, and how do you breach that gulf? And I think that rather than ignoring the history, as I share in my book talks, it doesn't make me any less patriotic. It doesn't make me question the Constitution. And I know that my book will even go into, and Catharine views that she can see both sides. She can see the faults and the egos and the trying and the attempts and the big dreams. And so this is just history, I think, that is important because of the contribution of the Iroquois to our Constitution. And we don't like to think of that as, this is our Constitution. It came from us and Americans, the new Americans, the patriots, but it's not so, really. And there were philosophers from Europe who contributed. In the 1970s, I believe it was, that I read, there was a senator had a resolution passed acknowledging the contribution of the Iroquois Confederacy Constitution to our own Constitution. But again, nobody knows about it. And when I speak here, New York, Pennsylvania, people know about the Iroquois, and I did a book tour there. but I'm back in New Hampshire and I'm doing book talks, and I ask people if they know about the Iroquois, and they don't. But even wherever we live, even here, the Pennacook and the Abenaki and the Algonquin, I mean, you know a little, but there's not a whole lot you know. And then again, where's the time to know? But I think it's happening, and I think it wants to be known. And again, you know, it's this whole guilt thing that can happen to where Americans don't want to know real history or put it away is look what we've done. Look what we've done to the Indians. I mean, when I worked on my other books and I was doing a lot of speaking engagements, and I do author panels, and it's the famine, the Irish famine. And there was a woman who was living here who had written novels about King Richard and other kings, and she was on this panel, and she was one of the speakers, and I spoke about the famine and my books. And after she stood up and she did this, us English, what we have done to the poor Irish, and it was sarcastic, but it was like, yeah, that's history, you know. I mean, I've written about this. I'm Irish and I'm English. I have Irish and English blood. It's not the point. It's history. And how do you know if it is? You know, who writes the history books? The victors.
That's right.
But so, you know, but it's like, that's why research is very important, and doing your research and finding primary sources and really doing a lot of comparison and studying.
Well, Cynthia, we thank you so much for being here with us today, opening up to us, and I'm sure our listeners appreciate that too. Thank you for joining us on this episode, Unveiling History, Voices of the Past. We hope you enjoyed this insightful exploration, Cynthia Neale's Catharine, Queen of the Tumbling Waters. As we close this chapter, remember that the stories of those who came before us shape the present and guide us into the future. Remember to subscribe to our podcast for more captivating tales from history's hidden corners. And as you go about your day, take a moment to reflect on a powerful legacy of Catharine Montour, a woman who defied the odds, navigated a world in torment. Keep seeking the untold stories, for they hold the key to unlocking the richness of our shared human experience. This is Michael T. We invite you to go to thebookpartypodcast.com, hit that subscribe tab on top, scroll down to the icon of your choice, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or Odyssey. You can download us and follow us there. Please leave a review, and please don't forget to sign up for our video newsletter and get the information on our upcoming shows. Book Party Podcast is owned and powered by MTM Legacy Publishing, LLC. This is Michael T. and signing off.
You must not miss our next episode as we delve into a world of inspiration, entertainment, and thought-provoking insights. Join Michael T. on the next Book Party Podcast and experience a new adventure, a new story, and a complete immersion into the world of Pages Unveiled, Chronicles of the Writing Journey.